drilling site that you visited, Jane, for one of those fire drill Fridays. I grew up at that a little league baseball park, although it's for for boys. I my cousins were playing baseball there all the time, so I was growing up there, and that proximity of this is our daily lives, this is how normal it is. It's something that, having this stage to be able to talk about it, and having this climate summit, and being able to use these tools of communication to uplift these stories is really important. And so thank you.
My the biggest threat of natural gas, which I've recently decided to stop calling it that and call it methane, because that's the name of the pollutant that
Or
it is
fossil gas.
right, fossil gas, methane gas. I'm sure these lovely women can speak more about the effects of, living near gas infrastructure, or um, uh, the health impacts. For me as a journalist, the biggest threat that I see from methane gas is propaganda leading to more climate delay. I have been covering climate change since 2013. When I began this beat, I had no idea what I was getting into. I just wanted to be a reporter. I didn't care what it was about. I figured climate change would be an easy place to get a job other than a political reporter, because I was like, no one's applying for climate change jobs. But and now look at us. But so when I started, I was really taken aback by the amount of denial rhetoric, and I spent a lot of my time debunking climate denial rhetoric. Not, I didn't assume that it was wrong. I went into it with a journalist's mindset, thinking, I'll fact check this. I'm like, oh, actually, this is wrong. Then it started to move away from outright climate denial, and I started to hear a lot about clean coal. Climate change is real, but we have technology that can fix it. It's called clean coal. And then I would do my reporting on it, and I'd be like, actually, it doesn't seem like it's very clean, or that it's going to do anything. And then I started, people would tell me that this was just another delay tactic, another way to sow apathy among people, to sow mistrust or just unsureness, so that people wouldn't be really fired up to move the transition away from fossil fuels. This delay has continued until now, when we're at climate change is real. We're not using coal, but we're going to use natural gas, which is a climate solution. And you'll see this everywhere. You'll see this on commercials. You will see this on posters in the airport. You will see this on your Twitter feed and ads. You'll probably see TikToks about it, and pundits and articles about gas, where there's both sides of the issue, that natural gas or methane gas is clean and that it's not. This is just another this is just another climate delay tactic. It's another both sidesing of misinformation. So the number one thing that I would say when you're thinking about methane gas or natural gas is that understand that it's a propaganda tactic to sow apathy and unsureness around you, to feel like maybe we don't have to transition away from fossil fuels, when the science clearly states we do.
I think it's helpful for us all to realize that there'd be no climate crisis if there was no racism, because big oil and big gas would have no place to do its dirty work. They choose communities of color, they choose indigenous communities, they choose communities of poor people who don't have the political power to fight back. You don't see these in Bel Air. You don't see these. Maybe one at the high school used to exist, and now it's gone, because white people run Bel Air. And so they don't put their wells here. All of LA is built on what used to be huge oil reserves. But they cite the drilling and the fracking in poor communities. They're called sacrifice zones. That's what they're called out in public by big oil and big gas, sacrifice zones. Who cares? about those people as far as they're concerned. It kind of helps the 1% to have a climate crisis because the people they want to get rid of will get sick and die all over the world. I mean, frankly, that's how I think their minds work. Okay? Climate sacrifice zones, and the mantra of sacrifice zones is, and this is really important, nothing about us without us. For decades, the environmental movement was racist. You didn't see people of color on the boards of the big green organizations. There was no attention paid to environmental justice. Environment you thought of as jungles and forests and wilderness lands and wildlife. But environment is everywhere that we eat and play and pray and go to work. Environment is Naleli's bedroom window, right? It's all environment, and we have to be really sensitive to the realities of the people who are suffering the most. And it's good to be able to say that the Biden administration appears to be putting extra attention on the frontline communities, the sacrifice zones. Naleli, you've talked already about the horrific situation that you were confronted in. At age 14, she had to be put into a witness protection program. That's what a powerful organizer she was. She raised such hell in her community to fight back against Allen Co. that she was put in witness protection. So I don't know if previous panels have told you this or if you know it already, but after decades of fighting, frontline communities they've been fighting for a setback, a safety and health setback, so that there are no more oil wells and fracking pits right next to their homes. Finally, last year, it was passed, the governor signed it, Senate Bill 1137, and within weeks, the oil companies began a process to overturn it. Do you want to talk about why this is a really bad thing, Naleli?
Where to start? SB 1137 is a statewide health and safety buffer zone between oil extraction and sensitive land, oil and gas extraction and sensitive land. As I mentioned earlier, I grew up 30 feet from an active oil and gas well. This oil well shares a wall with a daycare for newborns to 2-year-olds. It's 30 feet from a senior living facility, all ages of life, beginning to end. And it shares a wall with a high school for children with disabilities such as paraplegia. Something people often don't know about these wells is that every 10 to 15 minutes, they open valves to prevent an explosion. These wells are oftentimes also connected underground. So if well A has a problem and it's connected to B, now C, and the domino effect goes on. There is oftentimes no evacuation plan in place, emergency evacuation plan in place for the surrounding community, despite us living on a bomb. So it's important that we all get out to the polls next year and we start educating ourselves now on SB 1137 for our health, our safety, and our environment. Regardless of you living next to an active oil or gas well or not, it's by voting, you are allowing a 9-year-old to not become an activist at that age out of survival. You're allowing a 19-year-old to live her happy, full life. My grandma was diagnosed with asthma at the age of 70. Unheard of. You're protecting your future grandmother from having that diagnosis. The urgency we frontline community activists act with, it's because our lives are literally on the line. And that's the urgency we all have to act with. We have to act like our home is on fire, because it is. There's no planet B for us to go to. This is our home, and it's up to each and every one of us to do our part and to show up. SB 1137 protects people in their very own homes. Imagine living in a home and you're cooking and you want to open the window to release the smoke. Well, you can't do that when an oil well is your neighbor because when you open the window, you allow more toxic fumes into your homes, which will make you sick, and it'll take hours for that smell to go away. When drilling for oil, it smells like rotten eggs. Who wants to smell that constantly? And on top of that, the oil well in my community would add even more chemicals to mask the smell. So then my community would smell like guava, cherries, chocolate, anything but that, as if that made it better. SB 1137 gives us the basic, and I say basic, human right of breathing clean air in our very own homes, despite our age, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, gender, or zip code. And please go vote on SB 1137 because it's time. The time is now. No one should be poisoned in their own homes. It's not okay, period.
I'm not a writer, but I can imagine a scene where you don't even have to talk about it, but the family can't open the window or opens the window and then has to close it. Or, there's just so many ways that this can be brought into a story without making it rhetorical and well, it is heavy. There's no question, it is heavy. The Independent American Petroleum Alliance in California spent $10 million to get enough signatures for it to be on the ballot, this referendum to overthrow 1137. California ballot initiatives, being as they are, they're very, very confusing. Confusing, you don't know what you're voting for. Sometimes in order to get what you want, you have to vote no, or the other way around. So we're trying to reform, and you may hear about this, labor in California is leading an effort to reform the referendum process so that come November 2024, what you're voting will be very, very clear. Apparently, Big Oil is planning to spend $100 million to defeat 1137. So next year, it's really all hands on deck. We have to let people know what's happening and make sure that they vote the right way. Sylvia, I have a question for you. Tell us about the work you're currently doing in California to advocate for 1137. And what do you think are the implications of the fact that because of this right-wing referendum, 1137 can't be put into place? Those wells can't be closed down. Those permits can't be stopped until, assuming we win next November, but it's going to be hard for us to win.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. It's a really great question. And as I mentioned, I'm with the CBE, and we do statewide, local, regional, even national policy. And so working on SB 1137, this is actually a couple legislative cycles fight to get the health and safety buffer zone, the setbacks, as you will, to ensure that we do have a 3,200-foot buffer zone between where we live, work, play, worship, pray, even where our jails are located. We cannot have oil drilling where essentially where people are living. Whether it's 30 feet, whether for me it was across the street, less than 10 feet, and it's oil drilling, neighborhood oil drilling, especially in Wilmington, is like pretty much ground zero throughout Los Angeles. And so we work on the local level to ensure, or statewide level, to ensure that we get health protective measures that are rooted from community, from frontline. So these are the solutions that our community members, our community leaders are pushing forward. And so we're working to make sure that we defend our hard-fought community win, and we're doing this with our coalition partners. Definitely Nayeli here locally with the Stand LA coalition, standing together against neighborhood drilling, who has led the fight in Los Angeles, as well as some of our statewide partners, Visión, Voices in Solidarity against neighborhood oil drilling, the California Environmental Justice Alliance, CEJA, and so together, frontline environmental justice organizations are partnering with our big green partners, right, that you had mentioned earlier, Jane. So Center for Biological Diversity, as well as individuals like Michelle Pritchard and Lauren Davis, who are local LA leaders in this fight alongside with us, because oil industry, I'm going to correct you real quickly, Jane. They spent 20 million just to qualify, to get those signatures to reverse and challenge SB 1137 and taking it to voters. So we know, right, they have endless dollars that they can put behind to reverse and lie and kind of, right, cheat their way. They didn't get their way through the legislative cycle, and so now they're challenging us at the ballot. And they know it's very confusing, right, to take a referendum to the ballot. Most likely, as Jane mentioned, voters will vote no. And we are standing alongside our labor partners, SEIU, who is leading AB 421, to ensure that we clarify what it means at the ballot when it comes to a referendum. So that way we keep the law, that way we keep SB 1137, so we do get these health protective measures. And you know what's at stake right now? Because the law did not go into effect at the beginning of this year, what we have seen is over I think upwards of 1,000 permits have been approved for oil drilling, and of that 600, about 600 are within the 3,200 feet. These are within proximity to our communities, and so that's what's at stake right now, is that we don't have the protective measures that frontline communities have been asking for over, decades.
Decades. And you complain to the governor, why are you approving permits, 600 permits within the very areas that you passed this bill to protect? And they'll say, well, they're not drilling yet. But see, here's the thing. Once you issue a permit, when you try to then say, well, we're not going to drill there, they sue you because it's called a takings. It now belongs to the oil company and you're trying to take it back. So then it becomes a whole other legal and financial problem. That's why it's, even though they're not being drilled yet, the fact that permits are being issued is really problematic, and we have to protest what Governor Newsom is doing.
Real quickly, Jane.
Yeah.
I wanted to add in, because I realized I left out this big name, right, from our environmental justice partners, our big green partners. We've actually came together to form the Campaign for a Safe and Healthy California, so that way we can defend our legislative win come November. And so we're really excited to be in partnership this way and really bringing the message of frontline leaders to the forefront and have a victory that we could carry forward, not just from our legislative win, but now at the ballot box.
Yeah, good. If this attempt on the part of Big Oil to overturn 1137 succeeds, in a state like California, a blue state, a so-called environmental state, if it passes here, this is going to become a precedent for undermining democracy around the rest of the country. So it's another reason why it's so important that we not allow this to happen. Yonasta, I want to ask you, why do you feel that fighting big oil and gas is paramount to all social justice movement? And how do you think Hollywood can strategically collaborate in this?
That's an amazing question. Like I said earlier, this is a human rights fight. The intersectionality of environmental injustice is all people of the four directions. When I was in Standing Rock, look at my beautiful melanated skin. And I went in front of the bulldozer, and Amy Goodman was right on my right-hand side with Democracy Now! Shout out to Democracy Now! I just love them, so. But she was the media that was right there. And I had my son with me, and I felt like, okay, I could stop construction today because former President Obama said no construction. And they didn't listen to former President Obama for that day. So I went in front of the bulldozer to stop construction that day, and we all went up there. And I was up there. I helped with a lot of Standing Rock Council asked me to help them with getting non-Native people to fight against DAPL. And I did that. And there was a lot of documentarians there, a lot of storytellers, a lot of news people. And it was a lot of people that was in Standing Rock that looked just as diverse as all of you all. But the media showed predominantly Native American. And it was a documentary that followed me for about 6, 7 months, close to a year. They followed me, and when it came down to putting it on public television, to the editing process, they cut me out because of the color of my skin. And I'm just as Lakota, Native American as anyone else. But that's what storytellers sometimes they do in order for them to be able to keep a story going of whatever the fight is. I'm so happy to be here at the Hollywood Climate Summit amongst writers, directors, storytellers, because this fight that we fight for us to protect that Unchimaka, that Mother Earth, is for all of us. It's a human rights fight. It's important that all of our stories are being told, that it's not just diluted to just one race of people. Even on my Black side, police brutality. I was out there. I currently live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I organized the march that ended up turning into an uprising. It wasn't my fault. It was. I just wanted to. So, but it did end up turning into an uprising. But we made a lot of changes in Atlanta, and currently, right now, we are fighting against Cop City. And I want to acknowledge a non-binary Afro-Indigenous person, Tortuguita. He was a forest defender. So for anyone that doesn't know, right in the heart of Atlanta, Georgia is the South River Forest. We need our forests. And thank you, Jane, for talking about in these communities. It's right in the heart of a black community right there. And they're talking about it's 351 acres of land that they're going to bulldoze, all these beautiful forests, the lungs of what we need in this community. And there were forest defenders right there in the forest, because as environmentalists, as frontliners, we use our bodies, and we're like, you're gonna have to come through us to get to this tree, to get to this water, to get through this land. We're right there. So we camped out right there. And they shot Tortuguita 57 times. Tortuguita was sitting cross-legged, hands in the air, when the autopsy came back. The narrative was that he was shooting at the police. There was no gun residue on him. Both hands in the air, humble position. And they shot him just recently 57 times. And they have said that we're all the activists, we're now under RICO charges. They're trying to put RICO charges. Yes, we're organized crime for what they say now, which is crazy, and that we're domestic terrorists for saying stop Cop City. And so right now, the Atlanta City Council, it was over 1,500 people that we had at City Council, that they was going to vote $67 million of our tax dollars to build this militarized police training facility that is also going to have the Israeli Defense Forces to train not just police in Georgia, but the police all throughout the United States. Now, of course, I do believe that our police do need to be trained. But I believe there's a culture that needs to be shifted and reformed. But I don't think over 351 acres of land needs to be for this. I think it could just be exactly where everyone is at, and the training needs to be reformed and fixed. That's what my personal opinion is. And so after all of us, 1,500 people said, stop Cop City, and only about 10 people said that they wanted Cop City. The City Council voted and said that they want to go ahead and move forward. As of yesterday, our referendum was just passed, that we are now, as grassroots activists in the city of Atlanta, we're going to put this, we need 70,000 signatures in order for it to be approved to go on the ballot this November, so we'll actually get to vote no on Cop City. So I would love for you all to go to copcityvote.com and see how you can be involved. We need divestment, and we need everyone to be able to divest out of Coca-Cola. I don't know if anybody here from Coca-Cola, but it's a responsibility. But it's a responsibility, even as we're doing these summits, even as we are doing films, that we hold these corporations accountable, that are also financing the environmental injustice on indigenous lands. Well, all of this is indigenous lands, but on indigenous lands and in our communities. We have to hold them accountable. So if you ever want to know, how can I help? How can I be involved? I think the first thing is, this is a human rights fight. Yes, if it is, we Cop City, the South River Forest is in a predominantly black community, but the people on the front line are people that look just like everyone that's in this room as well. So it's important to tell that diverse story. And as well as it's also important for us to be able to hold these corporations accountable, the banks that we bank with, and finding out what are they funding. And I'm so happy that when we had the divestment piece on Dakota Access Pipeline, the city of Los Angeles, the city of Seattle, the city of New York divested out of Chase and Wells Fargo because they saw us in Standing Rock fighting against the Dakota Access Pipeline. But it took our unity. Our unity is more powerful than an atomic bomb. They are afraid of our unity. This is the reason why we're battling cancer. We're battling or fought cancer. This is the reason why they're putting RICO charges on us. This is the reason why they call us domestic terrorists. This is the reason why they constantly put more money into opposing us, because of the fact of our unity. Nothing more, nothing less. So just imagine when we all come together to be able to defend Mother Earth and also defend the people that living on Mother Earth as well. So that's intersectionality.
Thank you. Yes, it is. Emily, you founded Heated, which frames the climate crisis as a high-stakes corruption, power, and disinformation story. And I would like to know why you chose this frame, and what can Hollywood learn from telling the climate story through your systemic lens?
Thank you, Jane. That's a good question. Do you guys know why I chose to frame climate change as a power, corruption, and disinformation story? Like I said earlier, I covered climate change in Washington, D.C. from ever since I was 23 in 2013. And I jumped around from publication to publication. And I always found my stories sort of not prioritized, sort of not maybe taken as seriously as other beats. It was very rare that I would have a dedicated climate change editor, somebody that knew more about my beat than I did. And that was fine in the first few years, but as I continued to tell stories actually exactly like these, I would tell stories about oil industry opposing setback laws in California, and I would travel to Houston and visit frontline communities that were right next to oil refineries, and I'd go to northern Canada and see indigenous communities living downstream of tar sands development with the logo of the oil company pasted all over their town, and the only jobs that those people are able to get are with the oil company that is poisoning them. I'm years and years past, I'm covering climate deniers saying this, spreading the same lies over and over, and I'm starting to get mad. I'm just, because I feel like I'm not allowed to say, like, we're not, everyone here is being made to feel like climate change is some problem that we all contribute to. And I'm looking around and I'm seeing a system designed to make us feel that way and designed to keep this crisis going for profit, a crisis that kills people. And I'm supposed to sit here and be objective and be some kind of, and give both sides and give the fossil fuel industry's side. We have documents from 40 years ago that say they knew about climate change. Eventually, I kind of got fed up having to pitch this story over and over again. Every now and then I could do an accountability story and really tell, look at the villains, which is what I want to do, right? As a journalist, as somebody that came up under a really badass investigative journalist in New York named Wayne Barrett, he he was all about taking it to these villains that were in the name of something that they truly thought was good, hurting people, and holding them accountable for that. And I would be able to treat oil companies as villains sometimes, but I would always be like, well, you're kind of sounding like an activist. And I'm like, I'm a journalist. I just wanted to continue to speak that truth to power. And after 8 years of working at other publications telling me that that approach was not going to work, I kind of wanted to just test it for myself. So I quit my job. I started Heated. And Heated has almost 75,000 subscribers today. And this is how we approach the climate story. And this is like my thing now, is I just go around and tell people, if you think the climate story is boring, if you think that it's depressing, if you think that, people just aren't going to want to pay attention to it, you're not looking at it in the right way. You may still believe that climate change is something that is happening to you and not something that is being done to you. And that's the reality of what we're looking at. Every single story that you've heard today is an extremely compelling story about an individual fighting a systemic problem, and the systemic problem can be traced back to people with names and addresses and backstories. And that's so compelling. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that this is a completely good versus bad issue, because no stories are truly like that. But that's what makes storytelling, effective storytelling, so rich, right? Think of the movies that win Oscars, right? They have a clear villain, but you can you see that the villain has convinced themselves that what they are doing is right. And you see that with fossil fuels, because fossil fuels power so much of society today, right? It's the analogy that I like to make sometimes is that it's like a doctor has given you medicine that makes you super strong and fast and awesome, and everyone is taking this medicine. And we're so used to this medicine that we're like, well, how could I not be super strong and fast all the time? But there's a side effect to the medicine, and it's gonna kill a bunch of you. And if it doesn't kill a bunch of you, it's going to really, really harm you. Like, the side effects of this medicine are really messed up, and they get worse and worse and worse. And if you take a certain amount of this medicine, there's no going back. But then the medical company is like, and the people that work for it are like, okay, well, but everyone's really strong and fast. And oh, you don't want us to be strong and fast? Oh, do you want small people to not be strong and fast? Oh, okay, I guess. And you're like, well, we have this other medicine that also makes people strong and fast and doesn't kill them. And they're like, no, you don't. That medicine doesn't work. And then there's propaganda all over your life being like, the strong and fast medicine has side effects, but we're working on solving them. We're totally there, and we're fixing them. And then you have the medicine companies in your schools making sure that the textbooks are filled with information about how good the medicine is. These are stories. These are real stories that are happening with fossil fuels and climate change. It's one of the craziest things to me that people are like, I can't find a compelling way to tell the climate story. Look harder.
If I can add just one thing, 1 in 5 deaths worldwide is due to fossil fuels. 1 in 5 worldwide. Yet we continue to allow new permits. We continue to gaslight people when we go to the doctor saying something is wrong. We say, no, you're not. You're fine. You're young. You're healthy. You'll grow out of it. I was misdiagnosed for 5 years. I know I'm not the only person who has been misdiagnosed. I'm not the only person who has been gaslit. So we need to advocate for those 1 in 5 people worldwide so there's 0 deaths worldwide due to fossil fuel pollution.
We've been talking mostly about the effects on people, but almost 3 billion birds fewer in North America than there were in 1970. 50 years ago, we've lost almost 3 billion individual birds. Birds are now falling dead out of the sky over New Mexico and Arizona and Texas. Hundreds of thousands of fish washing up dead on the shores of Florida. You've probably seen pictures. I mean, it's happening. This isn't something in the future. This is right now. The brilliance of human beings, Homo sapiens, it's a Latin for smart man. All of our brilliance has been so misused. Let's reclaim it. And Hollywood can lead the way. I'd like to ask all of you, what do you think the effective ways we can push back against oil and gas and cut off their resources? You know, Hollywood is a major stakeholder in every global economy. How should we stand up as a community? Who wants to take that?
You know, there's a great poet that said, "The revolution will not be televised." But it's 2023 and we need television and we need it to be televised. And we need it to be televised. We need our stories to be told. It's really important in the age of social media and tech. We really need, if it wasn't for Democracy Now! That was right there next to us to be able to document how those dogs attacked us and how they was attacking us in Standing Rock. I know many of you all probably wouldn't even know that that was even happening in our own backyard here in America. Right now we have Chaco Canyon. They just approved the Willow Project. We have Cop City. There's so all around America, there is frontline activists. And I always say an activist is a person that is activated for change, to change something. And so it's always some trigger. It could be right there in your home and you're like, I'm coughing up blood. What is happening to me? And then you activate it to make a change because it hits you personally. It could be for you to see, you know, a young man, a man getting choked by a police officer, George Floyd, where you're like, I need to do something. It's always a trigger that hits you to activate for change. And so the thing is that it's important that Hollywood tells these stories from multi views to be able to share these stories because we need you all. We need these cameras there. We need you all to document this. And this is history that is that my son who is with me now, he's 12 years old, for him to be able to tell his grandchildren. In our Lakota way, in our Chetishikowi way, we say we plan for 7 generations from now. So the treaties that we signed years, decades, centuries ago was for today. So because of those treaties is the reason why we won the Dakota Access Pipeline to not be built, because of that treaty, because of Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse and Red Cloud, and these amazing chiefs from my Oceti-Shikomi, my Lakota, Nakota, Dakota people that they signed generations ago. So the moves that we make today is for 7 generations from now. My son was educating me about all of the scientists that came together in March, and they said that the Celsius is going up 1.5 Celsius this summer for the next 5 years. So that means that those that from 40 years ago that they were saying climate change is happening, they wasn't looking at us today. And we today can be able to make that change for us to be able to plan for 7 generations from now. So we can be able to stop or really activate ourselves, put ourselves on the front line, whether it's, there's different positions in revolution. Whether you are a storyteller, whether you are a Twitter, a Twitter activist, because we need that too, or whether you are on the front line, or whether you are divesting from these corporations that are financing for today and not thinking about 7 generations from now. This is all about greed. And that's what we're fighting against, is greed, because they want it now, right here, right now. But we need trees, we need water, we need earth. And the reason why we're seeing all of our relatives, our animals, our winged ones, our four-legged, our creepy crawlers, the reason why we're seeing them die like this is because the earth, this mother earth, is screaming at us right now. The weather is all shifting because Mother Earth is screaming at us and saying, stop, do something now, because I can't continue to hold you all and keep you all alive if you all don't do something now to care for me. So that's what's really important right now, that we do that.
Thank you. Any of you want to add anything to that? Yeah? Malala?
It's really important that we listen to frontline communities. Something I've always said is, I don't know all the science, I don't know all the legal terms, but I know what my body has been through. And at the end of the day, that's what I'm always going to share, truthfully, authentically, and unapologetically. I understand my story is a heavy one, but if I can live it, others can hear it. And that's the reality for so many of us frontline communities. Our survival is day to day, but by collaborating with someone who has the ability to look at it week to week, month to month, year to year, that's how we stand in solidarity with each other. That's how we show up for one another. When we need, 3 things that came to the top of my head are listening to frontline communities and allowing us to share our stories. Nobody knows it better than us. Secondly, investing in frontline communities, investing in the youth. We are the future presidents. I run for president 2036. Sneaking that in there. We need people investing in our future scientists, our future doctors, because we are that. And just because we don't have our degree now doesn't mean we don't have anything to share. Third, it's to show up. Show up, whether you have something to share or not. Standing in a group like this makes it 10 times more powerful than one of us standing here alone. You don't always have to know everything. You don't have to always share. You can do great stuff behind the scenes if you're not more of in-person type of deal, but it's doing it. It's getting your hands dirty, rolling up your sleeves and getting to work, because the time is now. The time was yesterday, if we're being honest. And our clock is ticking. But by showing up, we can do this, and we will win SB 1137 next year.
We will win. The truth is, it's going to be very, very hard to win, especially if we don't succeed in reforming the referendum process so that what we end up voting on is confusing. It's going to be very difficult. This really is an all hands on deck moment. So in a way, we're talking to you as workers in Hollywood, possibly writers who could write stories, television series, whatever, to address the fossil fuel problem. Get mad at them. They are killing us. They have lied to us. For greed, as you said, it's about greed. Just the greed of a few people is killing hundreds of millions of people, and it has to stop. Allow yourself to get really, really angry, and also to understand, please, the urgency. This is urgent. We're running out of time. So I hope that when the call comes, and there will be calls coming to join, rallies, marches, campaigns to unseat various elected officials who should never have been elected. When you go to the poll, find out first, did the person you're thinking of voting for, does he take or she take money from the fossil fuel industry? One of the reasons that we haven't been able to pass decent legislation in California, because there's a whole group of moderate Democrats up there in Sacramento that block the really good anti-fossil fuel, pro-climate legislation because they take money from the fossil fuel industry. So it's really important. Carry climate in your heart when you go to vote, and let's vote those buggers out, the ones that are taking fossil fuel money. And that's all the questions that I have. Do any of you want to add anything?
Could I would just like to add one thing, if you don't mind.
Please.
I get asked the question a lot. What can I do? You know, how can I make a difference? And I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I wrote a long article about this called "What Can I Do? Anything?" That kind of explains some of it. But something I've been thinking a lot about is that I think that we live in a culture that has sort of taught us from the beginning that if you can't be the best at something, that it's not worth doing it. If you can't solve this problem that you're trying to fix, it's not worth trying to solve. Climate change does not, it's not a problem that really lends itself to that type of thinking. It's too big. It's too wide-ranging. The problem comes from too many different companies and sources and governments. You can't, if you're speaking simply as a storyteller, you cannot change the way everybody feels about this. You cannot change everybody's vote with just one story. But you can change some people's. I like to, and I think that mindset of like, if this doesn't tangibly change the world, then I shouldn't even do it. That's an apathy that is like bought and paid for by capitalism. I'm sorry, like in capitalistic culture. And I just want to encourage everyone to tell climate stories, not that you think will change everything, but that might have changed you or your dad or your friend maybe 10 years ago or something. Write and tell stories to the people that you want to speak to, and understand that the impact is not going, it's never going to be measurable with climate change. I mean, sometimes it could be, and that's awesome, but that's not why you do it. You don't do, I think quarantine taught us all of this, is that you don't have to do a hobby to be the best at it. You don't have to just, you can do things because for this sole reason that they make you feel better and that they are what you care about. And doing that, telling those types of stories, not being like, well, I don't want to make a climate movie unless it's going to win an Oscar. Okay, well, thanks. Thanks for being in movies. It's just break that mindset and understand that like this is not a problem that can be solved by you alone, but it still needs you.
Great, that's a good note to end on. Thank you very much for your attention, for being here. We'll see you again.